Hello everyone, my name is Andrew Montlake, but you can call me Monty, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the 4th episode of Pathfinders. The Pathfinder podcast is all about the journeys we take in business and in our life. It's about the fact that the destination is not the be-all and end-all, it's the paths we take along the way that is a real journey. It is this that defines us and makes us who we are today. I've always loved talking to people, and in doing so over the years, and especially so recently, have found that many have remarkable stories to tell. Stories that we can all learn from and relate to, that will make you look differently at that person when you learn about their real journey rather than the one we all assume. So I'm setting out to meet real people who've inspired me, both within the mortgage, property and finance industry and outside it, to hear their stories and learn from the paths they have taken, the successes and failures that have led them to become who they are today. We all have a story to tell, and perhaps their story will resonate with yours and make you realise that you are never alone. We are all pathfinders finding our way in the world. Today's guest is someone who is incredibly well respected in the financial services industry and is a leading light and role model for many women in finance. Esther Dijkstra has been at Lloyds Banking Group for almost a decade now. Formerly Director of Strategic Partnerships and now the Managing Director of Intermediaries. Esther began her career in management consultancy with IBM in the Netherlands and moved to the UK in 2000. She previously worked for Legal & General, where she was Commercial and Marketing Director at the L&G Network and UK Mortgage Club, and has been described as one of the best managers I have worked for in my 25-year career by a previous employee. To say I have always enjoyed Esther's company is an understatement. Intelligent, articulate, passionate, authentic, and well, good fun, actually. So I'm delighted to have her with me today. This is the Pathfinder podcast. May the path you take be the right one for you. Hello, Esther.
Hello. Oh, thank you. That's such a lovely introduction.
That was good. I was quite proud of that introduction.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Now I have to live up to it, though.
I'm sure you will. There's no pressure.
Nah.
Chat
Yeah.
amongst friends. No one's listening. Don't worry. So I always start off with the same question, actually, which is just how are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
What's
Thank
going
you.
on at the moment?
Well, I'm a little bit wet because I've been just cycled to the studios because in my quest for being better to the environment, I've decided to cycle when I'm in London.
That's very impressive.
Yeah, and you have to kind of commit to it because if you think, oh, it's a bit windy, rainy, then you don't do it. So because it always is.
It's certainly windy, rainy today.
So, but no, otherwise I'm really good. Thank you.
Good. I'd like to be able to cycle actually, but I get too nervous.
Yeah.
Don't you get scared of the traffic in London? Am I just a...
No, I totally get it. But I'm Dutch, so cycling is in my blood, as it were. It genuinely is. And I must say, the first time I went on the bike in London, I was like, oh, I've really missed this. And it was just really nice. And it's a very good way if you're confident to go around the city. And I know my way now. I find my way with the traffic, so it's easier for me. I wouldn't say it's for everybody. Give it a go if you,
I'll try it.
Yeah.
I'll try it. I'm on the Peloton now, so that's
Oh, yes, that's a good start, yeah.
So anyway, we're not here to talk about cycling. So you're very important these days. You've always been very important, but do you want to give us a flavour of what your job entails now? Is there a typical day? And how do you manage your time?
Oh, very good questions. So what the job entails is it's quite a broad role, intermediaries in Lloyds Banking Group, because there are multiple brands. So it's both the Halifax, BM Solutions and Scottish Widows Bank. So it goes across a lot of the market, residential, buy-to-let, and, the specialist sector to a certain extent as well. But then I also have all the supporting functions, like some operations in there, broker onboarding, etc., marketing. But I also have the housing development team who look after the major relationships, with the major builders, which is another big part. And I guess that's what the role really is to look at housing rather than just mortgages or just the brands. And making sure that, for me, ultimately, we would want everybody in the UK to live in a quality, sustainable home. That's as simple as it is. Be that because people could be in social housing in the private rented sector or owner-occupiers. And that's basically what I try to do with a lot, with a very good team. And in terms of my days, well, it's every week is a different week. I still really like to go out and see brokers, so I do that, most weeks as well, because I do feel because I was on the stand the other week at one of the major conferences. I won't name any name. And it's just really good because you can quite easily, when you work for a big corporate and have a big important role, that you never get down, that's where it really matters. That's where it really happens. Absolutely. All I do is, ultimately, hopefully influence some people to change that conversation, between a broker and a customer, and, get in the customer's minds of how they can get onto the housing ladder. So every day is different, every week is different, and I have a very supportive team, and, we just carve out what the priorities are. There are some set meetings, but then there's a lot of travel and a lot of, different things.
Do you have like quick stand-up meetings?
Oh, I wish. No, in that sense, we're trying to really change that sort of culture of too many committees, etc., and do a lot via Teams in that sense, which I do think drives a bit more efficiency, because you kind of go through an agenda at pace. Not sure if it's always effective. That's a big thing for me, because it's a different impact, different thing. So a mixture of everything.
Okay. So, as you know, this podcast is all about journeys, the paths you've taken along the way. And I always start with early life and family background. And so you grew up in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
So can you paint a picture of what that was like? Was it typical town, or was it rural, or what was?
Very rural.
Was it?
Yes. So I'm from the ruralist, if that's a word, part of the Netherlands. Think more Wales.
Right,
Yes,
okay.
yeah. So very tiny village. I think in that 2000. Well, first bit was in a slightly bigger village, about 20,000 people, and then we moved to a tiny village with 2,000 people. Right. So it was very rural, very small.
So country girl.
Country girl.
Yeah.
Country bumpkin, and I still have in Dutch a really an accent.
Do you?
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
I have that in English as well, so just, keep a common thread. Yeah.
So what was growing up in like then? What was little girl Esther like?
Yeah. Well, my parents were they had their own business, so they sold electrical goods. Back that was the big era of that, and that's I think why I still like that sort of entrepreneurial business feel, because I remember that. But my mum always worked. She worked 6 days a week because the shop was open on Saturdays as well, and so they were both hard workers from that perspective. But my mum in particular, because she still also did everything in the house, the childcare, the cooking, the washing, so it was a real role model in that sense. And I think I was always very determined, and always very I kind of knew from a very young age that village, boats actually were too small for me. I had that zest for adventure, wanted to get out, and I was also from an early age, I think, if you can say that, quite clever. I just loved to read. I loved numbers, so I didn't when girlfriends would do friends. Were doing like things with beads, creative things.
Right.
I would just make rows and sequences and patterns and stuff like that. So I was never, and I never had that whole, a lot of even as we grew up, sort of talking about wanting to get married or stuff.
Right.
And I never had that. That was like, no way. I was fiercely independent.
I was going to say, very independent.
Very independent, very adventurous, and
was it just
very
you?
driven.
Did you have brothers, sisters?
I have an older brother.
Yeah.
And he's completely the opposite.
Is he?
So, yes.
He's a creative one.
No, actually, no. We have no creative. No, we completely skipped that in the family. No, he's actually quite technical.
Right.
But he sort of married his, secondary school sweetheart, never moved, lived sort of next door to where we grew up, whilst, we'll talk about probably later what happened to the family. So everybody left the area except my brother, who rooted down very, very young, never moved, still, very, So in that sense, very opposite and probably a bit more relaxed than I am because I'm a very driven person.
Yeah.
And that was always, I guess, in my DNA.
So what did you want to be then? What's sort of the first thing you remember you wanted to be?
Well, the very first thing is I wanted to be a prima ballerina.
I remember you telling me that. Yes.
Yeah, so I did try for the academy, and I first got in just after primary school. However, at that point, my mum said, because I was also selected for a selective grammar school, call that the equivalent. And I think my mum thought, does she become a ballet teacher, or do I want her to get a university degree? So she said, well, maybe next year. So I then did a year in the grammar school, then went again for the audition, and they said they had a conversation. Well, this is at least what my mum has taught me, because I wasn't privy of the conversation. I'm still convinced that they wanted me as a prima ballerina. But according to my mum, they had said that I wasn't talented enough to become the prima, but that I could become a teacher, at which point my mum said, no, you're staying at the school and just have it as a hobby. But I still do ballet, and I was actually in a show.
Still do it?
Yeah, I was actually in a show last Sunday in a little festival. Yeah, in one of the smaller theatres, doing a classical piece. So
really?
Yeah.
I'd love to see that. So you can still go on your tippy toes and
still can do that, but don't just to set the expectations. This is sort of a group of 50 plus ladies who just have a lot of fun, and we do value our art, and we're quite serious about it. We do rehearse a lot, but so
that's a lot of discipline and fitness and
Excellent. Flexibility. So
that's really good. There you go. Learned something already.
Yeah. But that was the first thing I really wanted. And then very soon after that didn't happen, I always wanted to be the captain of the Rainbow Warrior. For those of you who don't know, that's the Greenpeace ships. Yeah. And I really, I was...
That's the one that got sunk?
It did, but they have a new one. And still, I think still one day I would like that. Yes. Yes. And
so the whole green agenda and Greenpeace, that's very close to your heart.
Yeah, it was. And I was thinking about why that was, but my mum was already a bit into it, very into, growing her own food and healthy stuff. And although they also had their diesel cars standing, on the drive, to be fair. But even with that, she was always take the bike if you can, walk if you can. She was quite conscious, I would say, in that space. So I think it was partly that and partly the animals. I've always loved animals as well. So, when you're younger, that's sort of what appeals as well, rescuing polar bears and that sort of
that's lovely.
So I did demonstrate with Greenpeace when they wanted to drill in the Arctic, so I was part here of the big demonstration, and
excellent.
I still try and do my bit.
Good. So you mentioned you were very driven from young. Where do you think that came from?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think it's innate. It's sort of in me, and I think it's. I don't know if perfectionists are born or if that is something in your early childhood that you just. If I really break it down, if we really go like psychological, I guess it's probably my father was a typical, quite high. How do you say that? Perhaps not the most friendliest person. Very sort of, hard upbringing. Probably down from how his upbringing was. So very, you were never good enough. That was basically what it was. You were never good enough. And he was very shouty as well. So there was a lot of, you lazy, blah, blah, blahs. And I think, my reaction to that probably was to become, to overachieve. Also, I think my brother, that we briefly mentioned, probably decided not to fight it at all, if you see what I mean, and sort of,
I'm seeing a lot of parallels in my family.
So, and I think that was just me, was just always trying to please, in that sense, him, and do better. Do more, do better, go higher. And then, if you reflect, if you set your own standards, which is what I do, and you set them very high, that's then when you always try to achieve more. So, and it's sort of, this is a really funny thing. We all grow up thinking we're super unique because that's what you do as a human. And I found out I wasn't unique when my daughter got Lego Friends. And Lego Friends has characters with stories. And one of the Lego characters was me. She's the ballerina and the horse rider. I'm also a horse rider. And the one who doesn't hang out with the girly girlfriends doing the hair and doing the singing and the makeup and the beads, and the one who's a little bit, on the side. And that was me.
So you have your own Esther Lego Friends character.
Yeah, well, I think not
many people can say that.
Yeah, well, I think you will find that it's based on a lot of people. So that's when I realised, it's not just me. Anyway,
So you said that your biggest influence was your mother. I read, and a great example of combining work, family, and I read somewhere you said being fearless, authentic, and staying curious. Is that similar to how you've approached your life and your career then?
Yeah, I am. I'm so grateful for that. She was that, in that sense, that role model within, I guess, the constraints of her time, because she was still, basically you were sacked in your first job because she was a carer and then she did the combined role of running the business and caring in the early days of the business. So she was like working in the shop, from 9 till 4, and then putting, I think she taught me, my brother had to go to bed at 6 p.m. because she then had to do an evening shift as a nurse still.
Wow. And
then sleep a couple of hours and repeat and do that 6 days a week. So that was pretty big investment, full on. But I think she did it in the constraints of her time. What I mean by that is she probably, if she had been able to be more independent, whatever, I think she would have done even more with her life. But there were expectations, constraints, and but she was always her. She would not conform to because all the shopkeepers in the village had a certain, particularly the wife's off, because that was still how it was structured in the 80s, go to the hairdresser every week and sort of have certain images, and there's nothing wrong with that, but my mum just didn't conform with that. She was just her, and did the things she wanted, and was very adventurous, and that's definitely allowed me to look for that freedom. So I knew straight away, once I'd done the grammar school, I want to go away from here, go to a big city, and then travel the world. And that's what I did. And in that sense, it gave me that freedom to do that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So bright lights, big city. What were your first jobs? I know you went to Amsterdam and...
Yes, yeah. So I studied economics, as I said, always good with numbers, and then travelled for a year around the world.
Yeah.
So that was a great experience. And then landed in Amsterdam because you've then seen the world. And my first job there was basically to earn money. Was sort of a combination of receptionist PA at you would now call it it was a startup tech firm. It was doing, they actually did all the internet cables and what have you ever, which was probably, I was very overqualified for the job, but it was a small business. It had 20 people when I started because I did the phone list as well. That was one of my jobs. And I think by the time I left, it was sold to KPN, like one of the bigger, and it had about 150 people. But I just had a great time in Amsterdam, if I'm really honest. That's why I might not have as vigorously applied for jobs, because it was just a great culture, great young team, and growing business, and we would just go out a lot of nights, and then after sort of 6 to 9 months I was like, I need to do something serious. So that's when I went to IBM, because they had at the time a lot of the management consultancy. They were setting up the services division and growing that, and so they were doing academies where you could, roll in, get your training, and then you would be placed as a management consultant. So that's what I did then.
So when did you make the move from there into FS, or was that before you came to the UK?
Yeah, it was already in IBM, because even though you're a management consultant, they say which sector do you have the most affiliation with. And for me, that was, they called it bank assurance, because in the Netherlands at the time, all the banks also had insurance companies. So I was immediately went into the bank assurance sector. So so I did like stints as an analyst, etc., in insurance companies and banks, and wrote proposals for, did that sort of work. So I was straight away, because I had, because I was an economist, it made a lot of sense to be associated with that sector than anything else. So that's what I already got into that sector, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And so when did you decide to come here? What was that decision? Process?
So that's
it's a big move.
It is, and it's a bit of an it's a bit of a disappointing answer maybe, but then an interesting journey as it was. So my husband, who I met at uni and went traveling with, etc., he got a job in Amsterdam, literally, temp job with a bank, ABN AMRO. And he had a law degree, and so he just did, contract law effectively. But it was in sort of a tiny unit. I think there were only 3 people, and that was actually investment banking.
Right. Oh, wow.
So in the London office, they noticed him and they needed more people, because this is the heydays of investment banking. And they said, oh, why don't you come over? So he wanted to do that, but this is when we were 25. And when I just had started at IBM, but my father had died the day before I started.
Right, okay.
He had a heart attack. So that was, so that was it. So I was still not in a good space, if you see what I mean, because even though I was, living, on my own and had a job and not dependent, it was still a bit of a shock when you're, it's still relatively young. You don't realize that, but you have no peers who... So I was still sort of going through that process of, landing all of that. And also my parents had separated a bit before that. So, there was the winding up of all the estate, etc. So, so I wasn't ready to move. So he moved to the UK. And that was probably one of the toughest years, because I was still processing the grief. And then, he was over in the UK, and he was in this London world of, and it truly was, as you've seen in the films.
So what year was that?
So that must have been 98,
Right,
98,
okay.
99. Yeah.
So it's like a slightly tamer Wolf of Wall Street
Yes,
type
yeah,
environment.
it was.
Yeah.
But it was a little bit like
Yeah.
that. There was a lot of champagne and,
Yeah,
that sort of
yeah.
stuff. So, but I had, of course, no idea of what that world was like. So there was a lot of, it was quite hard because we tried to see each other every other weekend. But when you have no feel for each other, for
Yeah.
his world, and I was still doing, that was slightly messy year. So after that year, I was like, yeah, this is make or break. So I was like, fine, I'll move to London. So I talked to my boss at IBM in the Netherlands, and he said, oh, we want to keep you. There is an IBM there. See if you can get some interviews. So I got some interviews, and they then just transferred me over effectively when I was successful. So I continued in actually that was the insurance sector at the time, because they had it split in the UK. Where I continued my consultancy days.
So how did you find that, going from where you were to the London lifestyle? And
Yeah, it was exciting, but the first year was really tough as well, because when you move countries, there are cultural differences, even though the Dutch and the English are very close.
We are quite similar.
Yeah, it's similar, but still very different. So you have to learn a lot of things. Then London is a phenomenal city, but it's also a hard city. You have to, make your own way, if you see what I mean. It's not a very friendly city. It's not like you're landing in a village where people will make you,
hi, Esther,
hi, and yeah. So you have to work at making friends, finding your space, getting to grips with it all, and with the job, and particularly in a company like IBM, 99% of the people in a company like that are there to make a career. They all have good educations. So it's quite a competitive environment, a high-pressured environment. And, so it was, I found it a hard year, but also really exhilarating. I do remember moments when I was walking in London, and this is, the little country girl reflecting on, wow, I'm in this big metropole. And I felt freedom, because I remember walking around and thinking, no one knows where I am, and it doesn't matter what you look like, doesn't matter who you are. It gave me, in that sense, an enormous feeling of freedom and opportunity.
That's brilliant. I really like that. And then where what was your career path from then?
So in consultancy, it's phenomenal what they do in terms of training you. So they invest a lot in their people in terms of skills, both hard skills, soft skills. So I had about 4 or 5 years of lots of, training in terms of program management, in terms of, writing skills or influencing styles, all sorts of, and did, projects that were really interesting with big insurance companies, big banks, etc. But then after 5 years, I realized you kind of then need to really get into the career consultancy. So that means a lot of, it was still in those days very hierarchical. So you have to do a lot of, working with more seniors and doing stuff for them. And I wasn't fantastic at that, I would say. I always had my own opinion. So I kind of realized it was time to make a change. And they do that quite often because they like new people to come in as well. So they did a big voluntary redundancy. So I put my hand up, got some money, and then went into the industry, as it calls. So, and that's how I ended up with Legal & General. Because they were doing an intake, this will make you laugh, of bright young things.
I'm sure you were a bright young thing.
So that's how I applied. They just basically sift through lots of CVs, interview people, and I started there in change, because that's the most closest sort of when you've done consultancies, change management. So that was how I got introduced first into the a broker market effectively, because that was it was the IFA team at the time, because this was 2003, so that was even pre-MCOP days, where, remember, businesses were still doing both wealth and mortgages as well, so it was more an IFA type division where I was the change manager, and I got a change team to make things better for brokers. And I will apologize to, if there's any broker listening, was a bit overconfident, maybe walked into, I won't name the name of the firm, big firm, and just went like, hi, let me tell you how to run your firm, because I'm
Well, look, you can come into mine and do that any day. I think that's what I need.
So there was so occasionally some feedback of,
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And then from there to Lloyds Banking Group.
Yeah, so in Legal and General, I had a really rich career in terms of, they were very good at supporting if you wanted, to move on, do different things. So I then got into account management, a bit more change again, and then started getting bigger roles. Definitely, they set up that housing, which you still see a lot of today in terms of, Legal and General have sort of tentacles in every part of the housing market. Yeah. So I was one of the first ones when that was set up to do a role there. And then Lloyds Banking Group poached me, in the sense that they headhunted me away because they wanted to do protection in the intermediary space. They had stopped that. I can't remember when they stopped that, and they wanted to relaunch or reintroduce. So that's when I launched Scottish Widows Protect into the market first. Yeah. So that's probably now 6 years ago or so, I would say. Yeah, 6-7 years ago. And then Mike Jones, who I knew all the way from when I started in Legal and General, talking to brokers. He then said, I would like you to be part of the management team. So and he had a couple of jobs. So that's how and the rest is history. And the rest is history. Yeah.
So it's interesting. So Mike took you across. Did you? And obviously we talk a lot about diversity, inclusivity, women in finance, etc., etc. How did you find that? Did you ever feel that, not just as a woman, but also a Dutch woman, you had to work harder? Were there issues? Was there Dutchism? I think I can call it that.
Yeah.
How did you deal with all that?
There definitely was, because I even remember at IBM, a good mate of mine who also worked there, and I worked my socks off, and and I said to him, and then he was promoted, and then he was quite a relaxed guy, and I was like, Andrew, tell me, why is this? And he was like, well, you're Dutch and you're a bit, extrovert, and, you're a bit different. He said, I just fit the mold. And so I do feel I had to work a bit harder to just deliver, always focus on making sure I deliver. No, there will have definitely been moments in my career where you think, was that, I had 2 children as well, so you're out of work for a while, and it's hard, when you come back, to a lot of energy to find your feet again, and to to deal with motherhood, as it were, as well, because balancing a family and work is still hard. So in that sense, there will have been moments, but on the other hand, I've also been someone who you have to make the most of the opportunities that are there. So I was always a firm believer in, you create your own path. Yes, I had to work harder, but you just go and do it. So that's what I did, and there are people that support you, and Mike is an example of someone who's always supported me, and was very adamant as well, wanting me in certain roles. And Gary Burchett at Legal and General was another one of those people who always made sure that I was looked after, and got progression.
It's interesting, in most people's stories there's always a couple of key people who see something in someone a little bit different, and it's interesting, because I look at our environment and my business and what we do, and obviously I've never been in a corporate environment. I'm not sure I'd do very well in a corporate environment like you. I have my own opinions. And actually, we look out for someone who's different, who thinks differently, who's a little bit impatient to get to certain levels. That's sort of what we look for, rather than someone who just wants to plod along and fit the mould, so to speak. So it does seem to be very different.
Yeah, it is. I think. I guess you get that as well in a corporate, but it's because it's a bigger system and it is a pyramid shaped in that sense. You do have that competition almost. And that maybe therefore people, and we all do it. You are a bit more inclined to recruit. Someone who is similar to you, because you do have to work with them an awful lot of hours.
I'd never recruit anyone similar to me. It'd be a nightmare.
But I guess, but you tend to still sneakily do.
I know what you mean. It's that unconscious bias.
It is an unconscious bias, and I think that was more prevalent sort of 10 years ago. I think a lot, in that sense, things have changed in the last 5 years. Yeah.
So it's good things are changing. So what advice would you give to young females looking into this industry, or thinking, there's no way I can balance motherhood and work and get to where I want to get to?
Yeah, it's lots of tips. But you have to believe in yourself, because that is, because only you can believe in yourself. So that's where it starts. But definitely go for it. I see a lot of women that hold themselves back a bit because they are worried about mixing it, etc. And I would say go for it, because you can always go back. I know that's not something people want to do, but it's not that bad if you say, hey, I tried and it wasn't for me. So I definitely say give it a go. And then I have loads of other tips, like, be shameless in asking for support because you need it, particularly
Totally
when you have a family. So I reached out to, and it partly helps that I'm Dutch, so I don't have the, some of the cultural inhibitions that some British people might have in asking for help or approaching it. But I would just ask from neighbours to family members to, people at the school gates, work colleagues, just ask for support in whichever way, do a pickup, can they, come over, do some food shopping, whatever it is. Definitely it helps to, I've always got myself a mentor or a coach or a whatever you want to call it, always. It was partly because it's one of the things in management consultancy they train you in, to say, make sure you have got your stakeholders, as it were, for, to, if you look at yourself as your own business, Esther Dijkstra PLC, to get, a good group around you. So some people who can, support you, sponsor you, but mentor you, coach you. And I think that really helps as well. So that you have people who help you look after your career, and then you have people who can help you look after the sort of, the nuts and bolts of family life. And then look after yourself. That's a big one as well. So, and I had to draw my lines quite clearly. There were a couple of moments I remember where meetings would come in at, after 5, and there was a whole period in my career where I couldn't, because my husband was doing the mornings, and I did, we had au pairs, we had every form of childcare you can imagine. So, but it meant I had to leave sort of the city when you still worked in the office at 5, and I just had to say, I just had to decline the meetings, and I just had to be brutal about it. And I remember getting a phone call, I won't name the manager, once saying, because clearly was tipped off that I had declined this meeting and tried to find someone else to cover it. If I was not... like taking the topic serious enough or something like that. And I just had to be very sort of clear to say, listen, I'm really sorry. I might log on in the evenings again, or if that's necessary, but I need to leave at 5. I can't do the call. I'm really sorry. It's just what it is. And, take it or leave it. And it was fine. I think they realized okay, of course, because if people don't have that responsibility, they don't realize the practicalities of it.
Yeah.
And I said, in an emergency, I can stay, but I can't do that to the au pair or the nanny or the childminder or whoever I had at that point in time. To always be, late, etc., because that's not fair to them. So and when you explain that, I think people get that.
Yeah, I think so. A lot more so now than probably even 5 years ago, actually. So, one of the best managers I've ever had. That's pretty good. So, how would you describe your management style and what makes a good manager, and to that end, a good leader, I guess? Are you direct? Because obviously the Dutch, I know from watching a lot of footballers who are Dutch, they tend to, and the Dutch national team, if you look at football, they always tend to argue with each other because they're very direct. Is that you, or are you more empathetic, and how have you changed your management style?
It's good that you asked that. So yeah, I think the real key of leadership is you have to believe in your people, and you have to
totally agree.
And you have to trust them. And that's easier said than done. People might say, "Oh, that's really obvious." Well, it's not, because you really genuinely have
obvious
to trust
to
them.
say, but
obvious
hard
to
to
say, but hard to do.
Yeah.
So that for me is one of the core things, because that means you are a lot less controlling, involved, setting. Because I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I have a phenomenal leadership team that will run their own businesses, if you see what I mean. But but it didn't all start that way. And I will tell you a funny story. So this was when I first came into Legal & General, because I came through the management consultancy, very career-driven people, etc. Didn't manage a lot of people there. So that was started at Legal & General, and I was still my driven self. And I quite quickly, I had a little sort of corner office, and I was nicknamed the bitch in the corner. So, yeah, I know that hurt. When I found out, that did hurt a little bit. And I quite quickly realized that with me sort of stomping in and saying, freely sharing my opinions, that people weren't really warming to that. That was not how you make people.
That's hard.
Yeah. It was a harsh lesson. So I very, very quickly learned, because you have to mention, that was at that time still an insurance company where people largely had jobs for 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And they would, every day come in, do their little thing, be really proud of that, and, have their own stapler with their name on, and, stuff like that. Yeah. So now I came in there, sort of whirlwind of, we need to think much more ambitiously and blah, blah, And of course, that was always going to be a bit tricky. And so I learned very, very fast, that's not how you motivate people. So I really, I think I'm very grateful for it, because I think in my, zest for, that sort of, that what we talked about before, achieving things and being very driven and setting very high standards, that empathy side had probably sort of taken a back seat. And I then realized, actually, I don't like that. I don't want to be known as the bitch in the corner. And and I find people really interesting. So let's just focus more on that. And that's what I started to do, to, show a real interest in people rather than focus on what's the task.
But an authentic one rather than...
Yes. Yeah. I think I always had that, because if you're me, you kind of have to be me, otherwise trying to make it different never really worked. No. Tried that a tiny while, it didn't work. So I just, I was naturally interested in people, curious in that sense, and that's how I then learned, that does, if you connect with people and see what they want, and support them in getting wherever they want to get to, whatever that is, that that works a lot better.
That comes across in droves. I've always, from the very moment I met you, you were just down to earth and honest, and it's so refreshing.
Thank
that
you.
really comes across.
Thank you. Yeah.
We're going great guns. I think I'm not sure we've got that much time left. There's so much I could ask you, but I was interested in a couple of things, and actually I asked Richard, my last guest, this. I'm quite interested in what your response would be. So, what is your definition of success? Where do you feel actually you can look back and go, yeah, I've made it, or someone who's driven to achieve? Where does that stop?
It's a very good question, but a bit of an irritating one, isn't it?
Yeah.
So when you're sort of driven, you almost don't want to stop.
Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly.
It's, you know what? I pondered about it a lot, and then I thought, I don't know. And this is why the podcast is great, how you set it up. It's more about the journey.
Yeah.
Enjoy it in the journey. And that's what I try to do more and more, is just enjoy what I'm doing. I do think it's really important that you keep connecting to the deeper why. And I think if I look at my career, I think initially it was independence, because I needed that, the shackles of the little village, but also, you know, when my parents divorced, my mum didn't have any assets in her name, so she then had to work really hard to build up a life again. So I realized, I wanted that independence. So that was first what drove me. And then I think when my father died, I did realize how important roots in a home are. So I think that made that connection with, if you look at where I am now, there is some real logic, some real deeper whys in there why I'm driven. Yeah. And then I think now it's a lot more about, you know, I have a daughter, son as well, but, you know, and a lot of my friends have come to me and said, Esther, you can do it. You know, you've got, you know, the education, the career to, be that role model for a lot of women, for our daughters to you know, absolutely. And that's what drives me a lot now. It's sort of, you know, supporting, and the whole wider, for me, it's not just about gender. It's just, in my life that fits very well. But for me, that's an important driver, and I don't think there's an end to that, if you see what I mean. No. Who knows? Yeah. And I think I've learned, I used to be someone who looks a lot ahead, and I think, you know, you can plan whatever you want, but life will throw, and we've in the last 3 years, we've definitely seen that. Not just, you know, it's the world is such a different place now, so just enjoy it. Enjoy the ride.
It's good advice. Enjoy the ride. So what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
I'm not sure that's for the camera or for a recording. In terms of it is again one that's easy to say but not so easy to do. But it is be yourself, be authentic. That just but that's harder when you don't fit the mold. So
I get that.
I remember, you know, crying once for a boss, and he was a bit shocked, and he was trying to sort of, you know, he responded well, but then he was a bit like, you know, maybe you shouldn't do that. And I was like, well, that's me. That's, you know, you just have to, embrace that and be your, you know, totally even in those, so.
And final question. If you could meet one person in history, alive or dead, who would it be, and what would you ask them?
Well, I thought about that, and I think it's one of those questions where I think, no, I don't want to go back in history. I reflect, but no, history for me, sort of done. I like looking forward in the future, but actually, I like to live more in the moment. So I want to be here with you. And enjoy the moment.
That's brilliant.
Because you've done great as well, and so that should be celebrated as well.
That's the best answer.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you. And thank you for being so open and so Esther.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you like this, do pass it on to others. Please leave a review in your chosen podcast app. We have lots more fun, exciting, interesting guests to come over the course of the rest of this year, and I'm sure you'll be interested to hear their stories and their journeys and the paths they've taken to get where they are today. This is the Pathfinder podcast. May the path you take